Captain Kim Tae-ho stood at the window of his spaceship and watched something that made his heart heavy. Down on the planet below, alien creatures that looked like giant flying lizards were being sold like farm animals. These were not just any creatures. These were dragons. The planet was called Velthara. The people who lived there were called Velthari. They had 4 eyes each and skin that looked like blue metal. For thousands of years, they had been the friends and protectors of the dragons. Now they were selling them to make money. Tae-ho had been in space for 20 years. He had seen many strange things among the stars, but this was the worst thing he had ever seen. The dragons were not just smart animals. They were as smart as people. Maybe smarter. They could talk without using words. They could share thoughts and feelings directly from mind to mind. "Sir, we are getting signals from the dragon cages," said Lieutenant Park Min-ho. He was sitting at the communication desk. His face looked worried. "The dragons are making sounds. They sound very sad." Tae-ho had heard dragon songs before. 3 years ago, when humans first met the Velthari people, the dragons had sung welcome songs. Those songs had been beautiful. They made people feel happy and peaceful. The songs he heard now were different. They were full of pain and sadness. Even his toughest soldiers were crying. Down on the planet, a Velthari merchant was hitting a small hammer on a wooden block. This meant another dragon had been sold. The buyers were from different planets. Most of them were rich people who wanted to own something rare and special. They did not care that the dragons were intelligent beings with feelings. The worst buyers were from a group called the Karathi Syndicate. They had lots of money and no heart. Tae-ho had heard rumors about what they did to the creatures they bought. The rumors made him sick. Commander Lee So-young walked up to him. She was holding a computer tablet. Her face was serious. "Captain, we finished reading the old Velthari records. The dragons are not just smart creatures. Each dragon carries the memories and knowledge of all dragons who came before them. They know the history of the whole galaxy." Tae-ho looked back down at the planet. He could see security robots pushing a beautiful silver dragon toward the selling platform. The dragon was as big as a bus. Its scales shone like mirrors, but its eyes looked tired and sad. When the dragon looked up at his ship, Tae-ho felt like it was looking right into his soul. "How did this happen?" Tae-ho asked. "How did the Velthari go from protecting dragons to selling them?" So-young touched her tablet and read from it. "The Velthari had a war with something called the hegemony. The war cost them everything. Their cities were destroyed. Their people were starving. The hegemony demanded huge payments as punishment for losing the war. The only valuable things the Velthari had left were the dragons. So they chose money over honor," Tae-ho said. His voice was angry. "They chose survival over tradition," So-young corrected him. "But I think many of them hate what they are doing," Min-ho called out from his station. "Sir, Admiral Moon is sending us new orders." He paused and read the message. "We are supposed to watch only. We cannot interfere with Velthari business." Tae-ho nodded, but he was not happy. Human laws said that each planet could make its own rules, even if those rules were wrong, even if they hurt innocent beings. But there were other laws, too. Older laws. Laws about right and wrong that existed in the heart of every thinking being. The silver dragon was now on the selling platform. Tae-ho could see how the chains around its legs were too tight. The dragon's wings were folded against its sides. There was no room to spread them. Dragons were meant to fly free between the stars. Now this one could barely move. A Velthari announcer was listing the dragon's qualities like it was a piece of equipment. "This dragon is over 3,000 years old. It knows the locations of 17 different worlds. It can communicate across space without any machines. Starting price is 10 million credits." Hands went up around the auction hall. Numbers appeared on screens. The price kept going higher. 15 million, 20 million, 25 million. Tae-ho felt sick. He thought about his own home planet, Earth. Humans had made mistakes, too. They had hurt animals and destroyed nature, but they had learned from those mistakes. They had laws now to protect intelligent life wherever they found it. "Captain," So Young said quietly, "there might be a way to help them." Tae-ho looked at her. "What do you mean?" 3 years ago, the Velthari signed the Galactic Commerce Code. They wanted to trade with other planets. But that code has rules about selling intelligent beings. If we can prove the dragons are truly intelligent, the whole galaxy already knows dragons are intelligent, Minho said. Everyone has heard the stories. Stories are not proof, So Young replied. We need evidence that would hold up in a galactic court. On the planet below, the bidding for the Silver Dragon reached 30 million credits. The Karathi representative looked confident. He had deep pockets and no competition that worried him. Tae-ho made a decision. So Young, I want you to study those commerce codes. Find every rule that might help us. Minho, start recording everything that happens down there. Get close-up pictures of the dragons. I want to see intelligence in their eyes. Sir, what about our orders? Minho asked. Our orders are to observe, Tae-ho said. So we will observe very carefully. In the medical bay of the ship, Sergeant Jo Hyun-woo was taking care of Velthari refugees. These were people who had fled their planet because they could not watch what was happening to the dragons. Most of them were poor. They had lost their homes and jobs when their government decided to sell the sacred dragons. One old Velthari grabbed Hyun-woo's arm. The alien's 4 eyes were wet with tears. You must understand, he said in broken human language. We had no choice. Our children were dying from hunger. The hegemony wanted payment we could not give. But to sell the dragons, it is like selling our souls. Why didn't your people ask other planets for help? Hyun-woo asked. The old Velthari looked ashamed. Pride. We were once a great civilization. We helped the dragons reach the stars. We built cities that floated in the clouds. How could we admit we needed help from younger species like humans? Back on the observation deck, Tae-ho watched the auction continue. More dragons were being sold. Young ones. Old ones. Each sale felt like a wound in his heart. The dragons were not fighting back. They could have. Tae-ho had seen what dragons could do when they were angry. They could tear through metal with their claws. They could breathe fire hot enough to melt rock. But they were not using their power. They were accepting their fate with dignity. That made it worse somehow. Captain, So Young said, I found something interesting in the commerce codes. Section 77A deals with the protection of endangered intelligent species. If we can prove the dragons are in danger of extinction, keep reading, Tae-ho ordered. There has to be something we can use. Down on the planet, the Silver Dragon's auction was ending. The Karathi representative had won with a bid of 35 million credits. Guards were moving to take the dragon away. But just before they reached it, the dragon lifted its great head and looked up at the sky, at Tae-ho's ship. And somehow, without words or sounds, the dragon spoke to him. Not with a voice, but directly to his mind. Help us, the dragon said. Please. Tae-ho's hands clenched into fists. He looked around at his crew. They had all heard it too. The dragon's plea for help had reached all of them. Sir? Minho asked. What are your orders? Tae-ho was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who had decided to do something dangerous but necessary. Change of plans, he said. We are going down to that planet. But, sir, our orders. Sometimes, Tae-ho said, doing the right thing means disobeying orders. The auction was still going on. More dragons were waiting to be sold. But now they had something they had not had before. They had hope. Dr. Yoon Ha-eun had studied alien animals for 15 years. She had met creatures from dozens of different worlds, But nothing had prepared her for what happened when she touched a dragon's mind. The dragon was huge. It was as long as 3 cars, put together. Its scales had once been bright gold, but now they looked dull and sick. Heavy chains held it to the floor of the underground prison beneath the auction house. The dragon's name was Ashkara, and it was the oldest dragon still alive. Hayun knelt beside the great creature's head. Her hands shook as she reached out to touch the warm scales. "Can you hear me?" she whispered. What happened next changed her life forever. Pictures flooded into her mind, not her own memories, but the dragon's memories. She saw the birth of civilizations. She watched as species learned to build cities and fly between the stars. She saw wars that lasted for centuries and peace that lasted even longer. Most importantly, she saw the truth about the Velthari and the dragons. The dragons had not been pets or servants. They had been partners. Thousands of years ago, when the Velthari were still primitive hunters living in caves, the dragons had chosen them. Not because the Velthari were strong or smart, but because they had kind hearts. The dragons had shared their knowledge freely. They taught the Velthari how to build ships that could sail through space. They showed them how to grow food that could feed millions. They helped them create art and music that could move souls across the galaxy. In return, the Velthari had sworn to protect the dragons forever. They loved each other, Hayun said to herself, tears running down her face. They were family. More images came. She saw the recent war with the hegemony. She watched Velthari cities burning. She felt the desperation of a people who had lost everything. And she saw the moment when the Velthari government made the terrible decision to sell their dragon partners. The worst part was that the dragons had agreed to it. They had walked into the chains willingly. They had allowed themselves to be captured and sold, not because they wanted to, but because they thought their sacrifice might save their younger children from something worse. They were wrong. Hayun opened her eyes and found herself looking into Ashkara's ancient gaze. The dragon's eyes were like deep pools of gold and green. They held wisdom that came from living for thousands of years. "You understand now?" Ashkara said without speaking. The words appeared directly in Hayun's mind. "You see what we have lost." "Why did you let them do this to you?" Hayun asked. "Because we loved them. Love makes us do foolish things sometimes." Hayun stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak. She had to report what she had learned to Captain Tejo. But first she needed to know more. "What do the buyers really want?" she asked the dragon. The answer made her stomach turn cold. The Karathi Syndicate did not just want to own the dragons. They wanted to cut open their heads and steal their memories. Dragons carried the knowledge of millions of years in their minds. The Karathi believed they could extract this knowledge and sell it to the highest bidders. The process would kill every dragon they operated on. "They do not understand," Ashkara said sadly. "Knowledge without wisdom is just information. Wisdom without love is just cruelty. They will destroy what they seek to possess." Hayun ran from the prison and back to the human ship. She found Captain Tejo in his office, studying star charts. When she told him what she had learned, his face became very serious. "Are you certain about this?" he asked. "I felt it directly from the dragon's mind," Hayun replied. "Captain, we have to do something. These creatures are not just intelligent. They are repositories of galactic history. If the Karathi kill them, we will lose knowledge that can never be replaced." Meanwhile, in the ship's medical bay, Sergeant Jo Hyun-woo was treating more Velthari refugees. The aliens kept coming to the human ship, begging for help. Most were common workers who had lost their jobs when the economy collapsed. But some were special. They were called dragon keepers. For generations, their families had been responsible for caring for the great creatures. They knew how to speak with dragons. They understood their needs and their ways. Now they were outcasts on their own world. An old keeper named Kess grabbed Hyun-woo's arm with 4 thin fingers. "The humans must understand," Kess said. His voice was full of pain. "We are not evil people. We love the dragons like our own children. But our real children were starving. The hegemony demanded tribute we could not pay. We had to choose between watching our families die or breaking our sacred promises." "Why didn't you ask other worlds for help?" Hyun-woo asked. Kess looked away. "Pride. Foolish, damnable pride. We were once the greatest civilization in this part of the galaxy. How could we admit that we needed help from younger species? How could we show such weakness? And now our pride has cost us everything. The dragons will die. Our honor is gone. Our children ask us why we betrayed the creatures who loved us. What can we tell them?" Hyun-woo had no answer for that. Back in the auction house, another dragon was being sold. This one was younger, with scales that shone like silver. The bidding was fierce. Representatives from a dozen different worlds raised their hands, offering millions of credits. But everyone knew the Karathi would win. They always did. They had more money than anyone else, and they were willing to pay any price. Dr. Ha-yeon watched from the human ship's observation deck. She could feel Ashkara's presence in her mind, even from this distance. The old dragon was sharing the experience with her, letting her see through dragon eyes what it felt like to watch your children being sold to killers. "This has to stop," she said to Lieutenant Park Min-ho, who was standing beside her. "The captain is working on it," Min-ho replied. "But our government has rules. We cannot interfere with other worlds' internal affairs, even when those affairs involve murder." Even then. Ha-yeon thought about that. Human laws were designed to prevent wars between different species. If every world could interfere with every other world's business, there would be constant fighting. The laws made sense in most situations, but this was not most situations. Commander Lee So-young appeared on the observation deck. She was carrying a data pad and looked excited. "Dr. Ha-eun, I need you to help me with something. I have been reading the Galactic Commerce Code, and I found some interesting rules." "What kind of rules?" "Rules about the sale of intelligent beings. If we can prove that the dragons qualify as a protected species under galactic law, we might be able to stop this." Ha-eun felt hope rising in her chest. "What do you need from me?" "Documentation. Proof of intelligence that would hold up in court. Video recordings of dragon communication, evidence of their emotional capacity, testimony about their role in galactic history." "I can get you all of that," Ha-eun said, "but it will mean going back down to the prison. It will mean making direct contact with multiple dragons. Are you willing to do that?" Ha-eun thought about Ashkara's ancient eyes. She thought about the young silver dragon being sold to killers. She thought about the Velthari refugees who wept for the creatures they had betrayed. "Yes," she said. "I am willing." That night, under cover of darkness, Ha-yeon returned to the prison beneath the auction house. She brought recording equipment and medical scanners. She also brought something else, a message from Captain Taeho. "The humans have not forgotten you," she told Ashkara. "We are going to find a way to help." The old dragon's mental voice was weak but determined. "We have waited so long for someone to care. Tell your captain that we will do whatever we can to help him help us." "What can you do?" "You are chained." Ashkara's response surprised her. "These chains hold our bodies, but not our minds. We dragons are connected to each other across great distances. When the time comes, we will be ready." Ha-eun spent hours recording dragon communication. She documented their emotional responses to different situations. She gathered evidence that would prove beyond doubt that dragons were not just intelligent, but possessed of a complex culture and society. As dawn approached, she prepared to leave. But Ashkara had one more thing to share with her. "Tell your people something important," the dragon said. "We have watched many species rise and fall across the ages. Most destroy themselves through greed or fear or pride. But in humans, we see something different. We see a species that cares about justice, even when it costs them something." "What do you mean?" "You came here to observe and report. Instead, you are risking your careers and your lives to save creatures you barely know. This tells us that your species has the potential to become something great among the stars." Ha-Un left the prison with her recordings and a heart full of determination. She did not know if what they were planning would work. She did not know if they could save the dragons, but she knew they had to try. The auction hall was packed with buyers from across the galaxy. Today was the final day. Today they would sell Ashkara, the oldest and wisest dragon of all. The bidding was expected to reach 100 million credits. Captain Kim Tae-ho sat in the viewing gallery with his crew. They wore their dress uniforms and carried identification that marked them as official observers from the Terran Defense Fleet. What the other buyers did not know was that each human also carried a small device hidden in their jacket, emergency beacons. Merchant Prince Velok stepped up to the auction platform. He was a tall Velthari with expensive clothes and cold eyes. In his hands, he held the deed of ownership for Ashkara. Once he signed that paper and handed it over, the ancient dragon would belong to whoever paid the most money. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," Velok announced, "today we offer the crown jewel of our collection. Ashkara the Elder has lived for over 5,000 years. This dragon has seen the rise and fall of empires. The knowledge in its mind is beyond price." Tae-ho watched as hands went up around the room. The Karathi representative sat in the front row, looking confident. He had already won 6 other dragons this week. He expected to win this one, too. The bidding started at 50 million credits. Within minutes, it had reached 70 million. The numbers kept climbing higher and higher. Tae-ho looked at his watch. They had planned this moment very carefully. Dr. Ha-Un was ready with her evidence. Commander So Young had memorized every relevant law in the Galactic Commerce Code. Lieutenant Min Ho had prepared the communication systems. Now it was time to act. 85 million credits, called out a buyer from the Helix Corporation. 90 million, countered the Karathi representative. 95 million, said another voice. Velok smiled and raised his hammer, going once at 95 million credits. That was when Captain Tae-ho stood up. "Stop," he said in a loud, clear voice that carried across the entire hall. "This auction is illegal." The room went silent. Every eye turned to look at the human. "Captain?" Velok lowered his hammer and stared in surprise. "I beg your pardon?" Velok said. Tae-ho activated his emergency beacon. Instantly, every news drone in the star system focused on the auction hall. The story was now being broadcast live to dozens of worlds. Public opinion was a powerful weapon in the age of instant communication. "This is Captain Kim Tae-ho of the Terran Defense Fleet," he announced for the cameras. "I am invoking Galactic Protection Protocol 77 Alpha. The dragons of Velthara are sentient beings capable of interstellar communication. This auction violates Section 77 of the Galactic Commerce Code, which prohibits the sale of intelligent life forms." The auction hall erupted in chaos. Buyers shouted angry questions. Velthari security guards moved toward the humans, but they stopped when they found themselves looking down the barrels of plasma rifles. Tae-ho's Marines had been ready for this moment. They had positioned themselves throughout the hall during the past week, disguised as reporters and observers. Now they revealed their true nature. "You have no authority here, human," snarled Merchant Prince Velok. His 4 eyes blazed with anger. "This is Velthari's sovereign territory. Your laws do not apply." Commander So Young stepped forward with her datapad. She had been waiting for this moment all week. "Actually, we do have authority. Article 15 of the Galactic Commerce Code states that any signatory species has the right to intervene in cases of intelligent life trafficking. The Velthari government signed that code 3 years ago when you joined the Galactic Trade Consortium. She held up the data pad so the news cameras could see it. Furthermore, Section 77 specifically defines intelligent life as any being capable of complex communication, emotional expression, and cultural development. Our xenobiologist, Dr. Yoon Ha-Yoon, has documented all 3 characteristics. In the dragon population, Dr. Ha-Yoon stepped forward. In her hands, she carried the recordings she had made during her visits to the dragon prison. I have video evidence of dragon communication. I have documented their emotional responses to separation from their families. I have recorded their historical knowledge and cultural traditions. Under galactic law, these beings qualify for protection as an endangered intelligent species. The Karathi representative stood up. He was a short, fat creature with gray skin and mean little eyes. "This is nonsense," he said. "Dragons are animals. Valuable animals, but animals nonetheless. They have been bought and sold for centuries." "Not by civilized worlds," Taeho replied, "and not under galactic law." Lieutenant Min Ho had been busy at his communication station. At his signal, news drones from every major media network in the galaxy focused their cameras on the auction hall. The story was being broadcast in real time to billions of viewers. More importantly, it was being seen by the general public on dozens of worlds. People who had never heard of dragons before were now watching as creatures that looked like gentle giants were being sold to the highest bidder. The reaction was immediate and powerful. Communication networks lit up with messages of outrage. Protest groups formed on social media platforms. Government representatives began receiving angry calls from their constituents. But the real surprise came when the dragons themselves joined the fight. It started as a low humming sound. At first, people thought it was machinery in the building. But the sound grew louder and more complex. It was coming from the dragon-holding areas beneath the auction hall. Every dragon in the facility was singing, not the sad, mournful song they had been producing for weeks. This was something entirely different. It was a song of recognition, of gratitude, of hope. The harmonies were so beautiful that hardened criminals in the audience began to weep. Dr. Ha-Un felt Ashkara's thoughts brush against her mind. "The small steel singers have come," the dragon's voice echoed in her consciousness. "They who wrap themselves in metal shells and sail between stars. They hear our pain and choose to act." "Small steel singers?" Ha-Un asked silently. "Your people cover themselves in armor and build ships of metal, like we have scales and wings. But where we sing with our voices, you sing with your deeds. Today, your deeds song harmonizes with ours." The dragon's song grew even louder. It seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. The sound carried a message that needed no translation. It spoke of ancient wisdom and patient love. It spoke of betrayal and broken promises. Most importantly, it spoke of hope. Hope that someone had finally come to help. The effect on the auction hall was immediate. Many of the buyers began to look uncomfortable. Some even stood up and left. The creatures they had come to purchase as exotic pets were clearly intelligent beings with complex emotions. But not everyone was swayed by the music. "Enough of this!" shouted the Karathi representative. "I have a legal contract to complete. I bid 100 million credits for the dragon." Velok looked uncertain. The human intervention had caught him completely off guard. He had expected to conduct business as usual, not to face galactic media attention and legal challenges. "The bid stands at 100 million, he said hesitantly. "No," said Captain Taeho. "The bid is cancelled. This auction is now under investigation by the Galactic Trade Commission." Velthari security forces finally decided to act. They raised their weapons and pointed them at the humans. But before they could fire, something unexpected happened. Velthari. Citizens began entering the auction hall. They came through the main doors and the side entrances. They came from the streets and the nearby buildings. These were not government officials or wealthy merchants. These were ordinary people, workers and teachers and parents who had watched in shame as their leaders betrayed everything they had once held sacred. At the front of the crowd walked Kes, the old dragon keeper whom Sergeant Hyunwoo had treated in the medical bay. His 4 eyes blazed with determination as he faced the security forces. "Stand down," Kes commanded. "These humans speak the truth. What we are doing here is wrong. It has always been wrong." More Velthari joined him, former dragon keepers who had been cast out by their government, citizens who had lost their jobs rather than participate in the dragon trade, young people who had grown up with stories of the great partnership between their species and the dragons. "We will not allow this to continue," said a young Velthari woman. "Our ancestors would be ashamed of what we have become." The security forces found themselves facing their own people. Slowly, one by one, they lowered their weapons. They were soldiers, not killers. They would not fire on their own citizens. Merchant Prince Velok looked around the room with growing panic. His careful auction was falling apart. The buyers were leaving. The security forces were standing down. The dragons were singing songs that made everyone question what they were doing. "This is illegal," he protested. "You cannot stop a legitimate business transaction." "Watch us," said Captain Teho. The Karathi representative tried one last time. "I have already transferred the money," he said. "The dragon belongs to me now." That was when Ashkara made a choice. The ancient dragon had been chained in the basement for weeks. The quantum locks on its restraints were designed to hold creatures capable of tearing through starship hulls. They should have been impossible to break. But the chains were powered by the building's electrical system. And dragons, it turned. What happened next was not a battle. It was something that had never been seen before in the history of the galaxy. Ashkara stood in the center of the auction hall, magnificent and free. The ancient dragon's golden scales caught the light and threw it back in brilliant patterns across the walls. But the dragon did not attack anyone. It simply stood there, waiting. Captain Teho had expected the Velthari government to send soldiers. He had prepared his marines for a fight. What he did not expect was what actually happened. More Velthari citizens began arriving at the auction hall. Not dozens, but hundreds. They came from all parts of the city. Workers left their jobs. Students left their schools. Parents brought their children. They all came to see what was happening. Old Kes stood at the front of the crowd. Behind him were other former dragon keepers, people who had once been honored members of society. Now they were outcasts, but they had found their courage again. "People of Velthara," Kes called out in a loud voice, "look at what we have become. Look at what we are doing to the creatures who loved us like family." A young Velthari mother pushed through the crowd. She was carrying a small child in her arms. "I will not let my daughter grow up in a world where we sell our friends for money," she said. "I will not teach her that honor can be bought and sold." More voices joined hers. Old. People who remembered the days when dragons and Velthari worked together. Young people who had grown up with stories of the Great Partnership. Even some government workers who were ashamed of what their leaders had done. The crowd grew larger and larger. Soon there were thousands of Velthari surrounding the auction hall. They were not angry or violent. They were just there, standing, together, showing that they did not agree with what was happening. Merchant Prince Velok looked around the room with growing fear. His security forces were outnumbered 100 to 1. The buyers were leaving as fast as they could. The news cameras were recording everything. "This is chaos," he said to Captain Teho. "You have caused chaos on our world." "We have caused truth," Teho replied. "Sometimes truth looks like chaos to people who have been living lies." In the basement of the building, more dragons were breaking free from their chains. They did not destroy their restraints with force. Instead, they used the same electrical power that Ashkara had used. The energy that had been keeping them prisoner was turned into the key to their freedom. One by one, dragons began to rise through the floors of the building. They came up through the basement, through the ground floor, through the upper levels. Each dragon was different. Some had scales like emeralds, others shone like silver or copper. A few were so old that their scales had turned white with age. Dr. Ha-Un watched in amazement as the dragons arranged themselves around Ashkara. They did not speak with words, but she could feel the communication flowing between them. It was like listening to a conversation in a language made of emotions and images. "They are deciding what to do," she told Captain Taeho. "They are voting." "Dragons vote?" asked Lieutenant Minho. "All intelligent species make group decisions somehow," Ha-Un explained. "Dragons do it by sharing thoughts and feelings until they reach agreement." The decision did not take long. As one, all the dragons began to sing again. But this time their song was different. It was not sad or hopeful. It was powerful. It was a song of choice and freedom and new beginnings. The song had an effect that no one expected. Velthari citizens who heard it began to sing too. Not the same song because they could not make the same sounds as dragons, but they found their own harmony. They sang old songs from their childhood, songs about friendship and loyalty and doing what was right. Commander So Young was monitoring communication, channels across the planet. "Captain," she reported, "we are getting reports from cities all over Velthara. People are gathering in public squares. They are demanding that the government stop selling dragons." "How many people?" Taeho asked. "Millions." The Karathi representative tried to leave the building, but he found his way blocked by Velthari citizens. They did not threaten him or hurt him. They just stood in his path and refused to move. "I have a legal right to take my property," he demanded. "You have no property." "Here," said a young Velthari man. "These are not things to be owned. They are people with minds and hearts and families." The Karathi representative looked around desperately. He had spent a fortune expecting to buy dragons. Now he was trapped in a building full of angry aliens and freed dragons. His carefully planned business deal had turned into a nightmare. "I want to speak to someone in charge," he said. Ashkara lowered its great head until it was level with the Karathi's face. When the dragon spoke, its voice was gentle but firm. "I am in charge of myself. I always have been. The chains could hold my body, but never my spirit. We stayed because we hoped our sacrifice would save our children. We were wrong, but now we choose differently." Captain Taeho received a priority message on his communication device. It was from Admiral Moon, his commanding officer. The Admiral's face appeared on the small screen, and he did not look happy. "Captain, what exactly do you think you are doing?" Admiral Moon demanded. "I specifically ordered you to observe only." "Sir, I am observing," Taeho replied calmly. "I am observing an entire species remembering what honor means. I am observing the power of doing what is right even when it is difficult. I am observing what happens when people finally stand up to bullies. You have caused a diplomatic incident. The Velthari government is furious. They say you have interfered with their internal affairs." "Which government?" Taeho asked. "The one that sells its sacred partners for money, or the one that is forming in the streets right now?" Admiral Moon paused. Behind him, other officers were pointing to screens and whispering urgently. "Captain, are you telling me there is a revolution happening?" "I am telling you that people are remembering who they used to be, and who they want to be again." The dragons had finished their song, but the Velthari continued singing. Their voices carried through the streets of the city and out into the countryside. Other Velthari heard the songs and came to see what was happening. Some brought food and water for the crowds. Others brought musical instruments to join the singing. It was becoming a celebration of freedom and friendship and second chances. Merchant Prince Velok made one last desperate attempt to save his business. "The contracts are legal," he announced. "The sales are final. The dragons belong to their buyers." That was when something wonderful happened. The buyers themselves began to speak up. "I withdraw my bid," said a wealthy collector from the Centauri system. "I came here to buy a rare animal. I will not participate in slavery." "I also withdraw," said another buyer. "This is not what I signed up for." One by one, the remaining buyers canceled their purchases. Some did it because they felt guilty. Others did it because they were afraid of the bad publicity. A few did it because they realized that owning an unwilling, intelligent being would bring them no joy. The Korathi representative found himself alone. He was the only buyer left who still wanted to complete his purchase. And he was surrounded by thousands of Velthari citizens, dozens of freed dragons, and human marines with plasma rifles. "This is not over," he said angrily. "The Korathi Syndicate has invested heavily in this operation. We will not accept this loss." Ashkara spoke again, and this time there was steel in the ancient dragon's voice. "Then you will learn what happens when you threaten the children of dragons. We are old, but we are not helpless. We have friends now, friends who wear steel and carry honor in their hearts." The Korathi representative looked around the room one more time. He saw the dragons standing together, magnificent and free. He saw the Velthari citizens singing songs of rediscovered pride. He saw the human marines who had risked everything to do what was right. Slowly, quietly, he backed toward the exit. His business deal was ruined. His reputation was destroyed. His only choice now was to retreat and hope that no one followed him home. As he left, the singing grew louder. Dragons and Velthari and humans all found ways to add their voices to the chorus. It was a song of victory, but not the kind that came from defeating enemies. It was the victory that came from choosing to do right when doing right was hard. Captain Teho stood in the center of the celebration and smiled. His career might be over. His government might punish him for disobeying orders, but he had helped free an entire species from slavery. Some victories were worth any price. 3 days after the dragons broke free, the whole galaxy was talking about what happened on Velthara. News reporters from hundreds of worlds came to interview the humans who had risked everything to stop the auction. The story spread faster than anyone had expected. Captain Kim Teho stood on the observation deck of his ship, watching dragons fly freely through the sky for the first time in months. They moved in beautiful patterns that looked like dancing. Their wings caught the sunlight and threw it back in rainbow colors. "They are not just flying," said Commander Lee So-young, joining him at the window. "They are rebuilding something called the Harmony Network." She was right. The dragons were creating invisible connections between their minds that linked every major city on the planet. It was a way of talking and sharing thoughts that most other species could not understand. The network had been broken when the dragons were captured. Now they were fixing it. Dr. Yoon Ha-yoon had spent the last 3 days talking with dragons and their former caretakers. She was trying to understand what had almost been lost forever. Her reports amazed everyone who read them. "Each dragon is like a living library," she explained to the senior officers. "But more than that, they are historians, scientists, and teachers all at the same time. The knowledge they carry represents millions of years of learning from dozens of different species." "And the Velthari were just going to sell them?" asked Lieutenant Park Min-ho. "Desperation makes people do terrible things," Ha-un replied. "But it also makes heroes possible. The Velthari who stood with us in the square, the former dragon keepers who helped us understand the truth, the ordinary citizens who finally said enough is enough. They all chose courage when courage was hard." The political effects of the dragon liberation were huge and immediate. The Galactic Trade Commission announced new laws about selling intelligent beings. The Korathi Syndicate faced punishment from dozens of worlds. Most importantly, the Velthari government found itself dealing with angry citizens who demanded change. Within 2 days, Merchant Prince Velok had been removed from office. The old dragon keepers were invited back to their positions of honor. A new government was formed, made up of people who promised to never again betray the sacred bond between dragons and Velthari. But the real changes were happening in the hearts and minds of ordinary people across the galaxy. On the mining world of Kepler-7, workers refused to load ships carrying goods made by slave labor. On the farming colonies of the Vega system, families sent money to help rebuild dragon sanctuaries on Velthara. Children on dozens of worlds drew pictures of dragons, and humans working together. The story had touched something deep in the galactic consciousness. It reminded people that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stand up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves. Captain Tejo received many messages during those 3 days. Some were from government officials who were angry about his disobedience. Others were from ordinary people who wanted to thank him for doing what was right. The most important message came from Admiral Moon. "Captain, you are to report to Fleet Headquarters immediately," the Admiral said. His face on the communication screen looked very serious. "The Defense Council wants to speak with you about your actions." Tejo knew this meant trouble. He had disobeyed direct orders. He had caused a diplomatic incident. He had interfered with another world's internal affairs. According to military law, he could be court-martialed and sent to prison, but he did not regret what he had done. Before leaving Velthara, Tejo wanted to say goodbye to the dragons. He took a shuttle down to the planet's surface and walked to the place where the auction hall had been. The building was being torn down. In its place, the Velthari were building a memorial to remember what had happened there. Ashkara was waiting. For him, the ancient dragon looked healthier than it had in months. Its golden scales shone brightly in the afternoon sun. Its eyes, wise and patient, watched Tejo approach. "You are leaving," Ashkara said without speaking aloud. The dragon's thoughts appeared directly in Tejo's mind. "I have to face my superiors," Tejo replied. "They are not happy with what I did here. And yet you do not regret it." "No, I do not regret it." Ashkara was quiet for a moment. Other dragons gathered around them, creating a circle of magnificent creatures. Their mental voices joined together in harmony as they spoke. "We have lived for thousands of years," they said together. "We have watched species rise and fall across the galaxy. We have seen civilizations achieve great things and then destroy themselves through greed or fear or pride. But in humanity, we see something different," Ashkara continued alone. "We see a species that chooses to do right even when doing right is difficult. This tells us much about your potential." "What do you mean?" "We want to offer your people something that we have never offered to any other species. We want to offer partnership." Tejo felt his heart skip a beat. "Partnership? We will teach you the deep sciences. We will share the wisdom we have gathered over millions of years. We will help you avoid the mistakes that have destroyed other civilizations. In return, you will help us ensure that what happened here never happens again anywhere in the galaxy." The offer was incredible. The dragons possessed knowledge that could advance human technology by centuries. They understood secrets of science and philosophy that most species never learned. They could help humanity become one of the great civilizations of the galaxy. But there was a condition. "You must promise," Ashkara said, "that you will never use what we teach you only for your own benefit. Knowledge shared in harmony must be shared with harmony. You will become teachers in turn, helping younger species find their way among the stars." Tejo thought about his crew. Commander So Young, whose quick thinking had provided the legal framework to challenge the auction, Dr. Ha-Un, whose compassion had allowed her to communicate with beings beyond human understanding, Lieutenant Minho, whose technical skills had broadcast their message to the galaxy, Sergeant Hyun Woo, whose kindness had comforted refugees in their darkest hour. They had all risked their careers to do what was right. They had shown that humanity at its best could be a force for good. "In the universe, we accept Tae-ho said. The dragons began to sing. Their voices rose in harmonies that seemed to touch the sky. But this time, they were not alone. Velthari citizens who had gathered to watch added their own voices to the song. And somehow, impossibly, the humans found they could contribute too, not with voices, but with the steady rhythm of hearts that had chosen to do right when doing right was hard. Kes, the old dragon keeper, approached Captain Tae-ho as the song continued. "Thank you," he said simply. "You gave us back our honor." "You always had your honor," Tae-ho replied. "You just forgot where to look for it." That evening, Tae-ho prepared to leave Velthera. His ship was loaded with data crystals containing dragon knowledge. More importantly, it carried a new understanding between species that had never existed before. Dr. Ha-un was staying behind to establish a research station where humans and dragons could work together. Commander So Young was being transferred to the Galactic Trade Commission to help write new laws protecting intelligent life. Lieutenant Min Ho had been offered a position with the Interstellar Communication Network. They were all moving on to new assignments. But they would never forget what they had accomplished together. As Tae-ho's ship lifted off from Velthera, he looked down at the planet one last time. Dragons soared through the sky in complex patterns. Velthari cities glowed. With renewed pride, construction crews were building new sanctuaries where dragons and their partners could live together in harmony. The galaxy had been changed by what happened here, not through war or conquest, but through the simple act of standing up for what was right. In the months that followed, the story of the dragon liberation would become legend. It would be told wherever beings gathered to speak of courage and compassion. It would inspire other acts of heroism across the stars. But for those who were there, who heard the dragons sing and felt the moment when despair became hope, it was something more than legend. It was proof that sometimes when you choose to do right, the whole universe chooses to do right with you. 6 months after the dragon liberation, Captain Kim Tae-ho found himself in a place he had never expected to be. He was sitting in a vast underground chamber deep within the oldest mountain on Velthara. The walls were covered with crystals that glowed with soft light. The crystals helped carry dragon thoughts across great distances. Tae-ho was no longer just a captain. The human government had promoted him to admiral after learning about the Dragon Alliance. But more importantly, he had been chosen to represent all of humanity in formal talks with the Dragon Council. The Dragon Council was made up of the oldest and wisest dragons from across the galaxy. They had been meeting in this chamber for thousands of years, making decisions that affected entire civilizations. No human had ever been invited to attend their meetings before. Ashkara served as the main speaker for the council. The ancient dragon looked magnificent in the crystal light. Its golden scales seemed to glow from within. When it spoke, its voice filled not just the chamber, but the minds of everyone present. "Steel Singers of Earth," Ashkara began, using the dragon name, for humans. 6 months ago you came to our aid when we had given up hope. You risked your careers, your lives, your standing among the star nations for beings you barely knew. This act of courage has changed everything. Admiral Tae-ho bowed his head respectfully. We did what anyone should have done. No intelligent being deserves to be sold like property. Yet no one else acted, said another dragon, its scales the color of deep blue ocean. Only humans, only your people. This tells us much about your species. Dr. Yoon Ha-yoon sat beside Tae-ho. She had spent the last 6 months learning to communicate with dragons. Her research had led to breakthroughs that amazed scientists across the galaxy. What exactly are you telling us? She asked. We are telling you that we want to make you an offer that we have never made to any other species in the history of the galaxy, Ashkara replied. The chamber fell silent. Even the crystal formations seemed to dim as if they were listening carefully. We offer you full partnership, Ashkara continued. Not a trade agreement, Not a military alliance, something far deeper and more meaningful. We offer to share all our knowledge with you. Everything we have learned in millions of years of existence. Commander Lee So-young leaned forward. She had been studying galactic law for months, preparing for this moment. What would such a partnership involve? "We will teach you the deep sciences," said a dragon with scales like polished silver. "Physics that other species take centuries to discover. Mathematics that can unlock the secrets of the universe. Biology that can heal diseases and extend life. We will share our understanding of harmony between thinking beings," added another dragon, its scales rainbow-colored. "Philosophy that can help your species avoid the wars and conflicts that destroy most civilizations. We will give you the wisdom of ages," concluded a dragon so old its scales had turned pure white. "Knowledge of how to build societies that last for millennia. Understanding of how to explore the stars without losing your souls." The offer was beyond anything humans had ever imagined. The dragons possessed scientific knowledge that could advance Earth's technology by thousands of years. They understood secrets of philosophy and culture that could help humanity become one of the great civilizations of the galaxy. But Admiral Tae-ho sensed there was more to this offer. "What do you ask in return?" he said. Ashkara's ancient eyes seemed to look directly into his soul. "We ask for something that may be harder to give than anything else. We ask you to promise that you will never use what we teach you only for your own benefit." "What do you mean?" "Knowledge shared in harmony must be shared with harmony," Ashkara explained. "If we teach you how to build faster ships, you must share that knowledge with other species who need it. If we show you how to cure diseases, you must help heal all who suffer, not just your own people." The dragon paused, letting the weight of its words sink in. "You must become teachers in turn," Ashkara continued. "Just as you helped us find our way back to freedom, you must help younger species find their way among the stars. You must promise to use your new knowledge to protect the weak and defend the innocent, wherever they may be found." Lieutenant Park Min-ho, who had been quietly taking notes, looked up. "You are asking us to become guardians of the galaxy." "We are asking you to become what we once were," said Ashkara sadly. "Before we grew old and tired, before we retreated to our mountains and forgot our duty to the younger races." Dr. Ha-yun suddenly understood. "You made this offer to the Velthari once, didn't you? Long ago, when they were young." "Yes," Ashkara admitted. "Thousands of years ago, we chose the Velthari as our partners. We shared our knowledge with them. We helped them build a great civilization. For a time, they were everything we hoped they would be. They used what we taught them to help other species reach the stars. But then they changed," So-young said. "All species change," replied the white-scaled ancient dragon. "Some change for the better, others change for the worse. The Velthari became proud. They began to believe that their knowledge made them superior to other races. They forgot that wisdom shared must be wisdom given freely. When the war came, when they faced destruction, they chose to abandon their principles rather than ask for help," Ashkara continued. "Pride became their downfall. They sold us, their partners, to save themselves from embarrassment." Tae-ho began to understand the full weight of what was being offered. "You are giving us a second chance, not just for yourselves, but for the galaxy." "We are old," Ashkara said simply. "We have seen too much pain and loss. We need younger partners who still believe that right and wrong matter more than profit and power. In your actions at the auction, you proved that humans can be trusted with great responsibility." The Dragon Council waited in silence while the humans considered the offer. It was not a decision that could be made quickly. The partnership would change the course of human history. It would also change what it meant to be human. Finally, Admiral Tae-ho spoke for his species. "We accept," he said, but we want to add our own condition." Ashkara tilted its great head curiously. "What condition?" "If we fail, if we become like the Velthari and forget our principles, you must do to us what we did for you. You must stand up to us. You must remind us who we are supposed to be." The dragons began to sing. Their voices rose in harmonies that seemed to fill the entire mountain. It was a song of agreement, of hope, of new beginnings. For the first time in centuries, the dragons sang of the future instead of the past. Dr. Ha-Yun felt tears running down her face. Through her mental connection with the dragons, she could feel their joy and relief. They had been alone for so long, carrying the burden of galactic wisdom with no one to share it with. Now they had partners again. The ceremony lasted for hours. Dragons and humans worked together to create the formal documents that would govern their partnership. They established research stations where both species could work side by side. They planned schools where human children and dragon hatchlings could learn together. Most importantly, they created the Guardian Protocol. This was a promise that humans would use their new knowledge to protect other species from exploitation and oppression. Wherever beings were enslaved or abused, wherever the strong preyed upon the weak, humans would stand ready to help. When the ceremony ended, Admiral Tae-ho walked outside into the evening air. Velthara's 2 moons were rising over the mountains. In the distance, he could see dragons flying in complex patterns against the starlit sky. Commander So Young joined him. "Do you think we can live up to their expectations?" she asked. "I think we have to try," Tae-ho replied. 6 months ago, we were just observers. Now we are guardians of galactic civilization. It is a big responsibility. But we proved we can. "Handle big responsibilities," said Dr. Ha-Un, walking up to them. "We proved that humans will do the right thing, even when it costs us something." In the years that followed, the Human-Dragon Alliance would become legendary throughout the galaxy. Human ships, powered by dragon-designed engines, could cross vast distances in days instead of months. Human colonies, guided by dragon wisdom, became beacons of peace and prosperity among the stars. More importantly, humans kept their promise. When the Zephyrian Empire tried to enslave the peaceful Lotus people, human fleets arrived to stop them. When plague threatened the farming worlds of the Outer Rim, human medical ships brought dragon-designed cures. When young species reached for the stars, humans were there to guide them safely into the galactic community. The auction houses of Velthara were torn down and replaced with schools. Children from dozens of species learned together in classrooms where human teachers and dragon mentors shared wisdom accumulated over millions of years. And in the deepest chambers of the old mountain, the Dragon Council continued to meet. But now they were joined by human advisors who brought fresh perspectives to age-old problems. The galaxy had found its guardians at last. Not through conquest or superior technology, but through the simple choice to do right when doing right was hard. Sometimes that was all it took to change the universe.